The book, Five Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford, which is on Amazon.com. Also, I guess would be co-author, correct, Lisa? That's correct. Your title, co-author. McCubbin is in with us, too, because tonight at 7 p.m., you will be at the Jimmy Carter Library. Actually, it's at the Carter Center Cecil B. Day Chapel. I believe that's where you'll be doing the signing, where you'll do meet and greets and meet the fans and sign autographs, and people can buy the book there. But welcome back to the show. Welcome to the show, and welcome back to the show, Mr. Hill.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, this is great. It's such great feedback. It's funny because, Steve and I have been in radio for a long time. We've interviewed so many people, but you are the first guest in both of our careers, which equate to about 50 years in radio, that both he and I were so not overly excited, but nervous to have in the studio.
Clint, you make me nervous, man.
We had to clean up and everything.
He's 84. Don't be nervous.
No. I'm 52. I told you that one.
But I don't know about Bailey, but I was losing, I would say lost a little bit of sleep last night, because I would think, and Bailey and I have talked, we're both conspiracy buffs, but we look at the Kennedy assassination, and I am so caught up in the Camelot and where the country was, and then the assassination, and it's just such a crime. And the fact that you were there, not only with Kennedy and were the one to get on the back of the vehicle, but you were with 5 presidents. You have seen history of this country, and it is overpowering to be in your presence.
Well, I was very fortunate to be there during that period of time, and I did see history up close and personal. In many instances, it was something you didn't want to see, but in other instances, it was really a pleasure to witness.
Okay, so start with Eisenhower. I mean, obviously,
where it all began.
Where it all began. Was there a moment that you almost did not become a Secret Service agent? Was there like a time where it was you had to make a decision? Because your stories are fantastic. I mean, did this almost not happen, I guess?
Well, once I made the decision to go, I had been a special agent in counterintelligence for the Army. Mm-hmm. And when I got out of the Army, I was looking for something to do. I liked the investigative work, so I just selected the Secret Service as a pretty good fit. So I chose that, but there were no vacancies. There were 269 agents at that time in the entire organization worldwide. So, and there were no people that, unless they died or retired, there wasn't a slot open. Yeah. Well, in my case, after I applied, and then I had to wait for about 8 months or so. And then a guy did retire, and they gave me that slot.
So because that gentleman retired, you then get the job of serving under these 5 presidents, which then in turn brings us to Dallas, which then in turn brings you to the guy that we've all seen the Zapruder film, gentleman, that jumps on the back of the. I mean, it's so overwhelming that the history that you're bringing to the show right now, it blows my mind. It really does.
I mean, you look at Jackie and your detail coming out of Eisenhower. I understand that you were assigned to Jackie Kennedy, not John Kennedy, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So how did that work? So you would see the detail go out with John Kennedy, JF Kennedy, wherever he was going, and you would go where she was going. So you were caught up in the First Lady protection only.
She was my responsibility, and then the children were with her most of the time. There were 2 agents that were assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, I being one, and then there were 3 agents assigned to the children, but we kind of worked as a team. But we also worked as a part of the team with the president whenever we were together. And in my case, I was kind of the go-between between Mrs. Kennedy and the president. For example, we'd be in New York, and she would want to go see someone. On one occasion, it was former President Truman. But she had to clear that first with the president to make sure it was okay. Well, then she had me call the president's office, and I talked to the president's secretary, and then he always got on the phone and talked to me directly and told me what he did want her to do or wanted her not to do. So,
what did he never want her to do?
Well, on that occasion, he didn't want her to go see Truman at that time because he had plans for a meeting with him about something, and he didn't want to disrupt that.
Oh, wow.
And there were other times he asked me to see that certain things did not happen or did happen.
Like in Italy?
Like in Italy, he asked me not to permit her to be photographed in a bikini, not to be photographed with a great number of wine glasses on a table. In Greece, in 1961, not to cross paths with Aristotle Onassis.
So there, see now, there's so much. I mean, Clint, can you just stay on the show for like 2 weeks straight? I mean, my God.
How did you reel her in? We're talking about the first lady here. I mean, the most powerful woman in the country, if not the world.
Well, we had a great relationship, and she trusted me, and she trusted my decisions, and so I didn't have a problem.
Did she confide in you? Because there's a couple of ways, and I don't want to get too bogged down in it, but I assume when you write a book like this, there's only so much information you want to get out. I mean, I'm sure you're pretty protective and you're an honorable person, but at that time, we know that JFK was, kind of doing what he did with women, and then you've got her, and you're saying that John did not want her getting near Onassis, which later she would marry. So what was going on?
Well, at that time, she didn't get near Onassis either. I made sure of that. But they had a wonderful relationship. Most people don't think that, but that's true. She and the president were very, very close.
And we want to believe that. That's Camelot.
Well, I mean, they were, and they were very devoted to each other and to the children. And she took special interest in trying to make him have his relaxed time. And like in the evening when he would come over from the Oval Office, she would have some friends in as guests for a real small, intimate but friendly dinner, so he could just unwind for a while, because a president is on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year, and there's very little downtime.
Wow.
And she tried to provide that for him.
And he had pain, from the PT 109, the back injury. And President John F. K. was not a healthy individual.
No, he wasn't. He had a back problem. He wore a back brace. And the only real way to solve that problem was through medication that he had a special doctor, Janet Travell, who was a back specialist that worked with him. And so it was very difficult for him.
Tonight at 7 o'clock, you can meet Mr. Clint Hill, former United States Secret Service agent, author of the book, 5 Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. Also, the co-author of the book, Lisa McCubbin, who is in here as well. And there's a little bit, obviously, of an age gap from everybody in this room having this conversation. But this is fascinating to you, and how did you get caught up in this as far as to team up with Mr. Hill?
Well, I was writing another book back in 2009, and we needed some information. I was working with another former agent, and I needed to interview someone who had been in Dallas, and he introduced me to Clint, and at first Clint didn't want to talk to me, but he gave me 2 hours in Washington, D.C., and I was fascinated, as you are, and I wanted more.
Sure.
And he made one mistake that day, didn't you, Clint?
I sure did. I made a big mistake.
What'd you do?
Gave her my phone number.
Damn it, Clint. You know better. You're in the Secret Service. You know better.
I know.
He's never given out his phone number since, but I have his phone number, so I would call him with follow-up questions. And like you, I was fascinated with his stories, and he slowly opened up to me, and then we convinced him to write his own book. And so I've been with him now for about 5 years, and I don't get tired of hearing his story.
Well, tease us, Lisa. Which way did you go with this book? And I think Bailey and I both are interested in where you went. There's so much information. Do you get bogged down in the conspiracies? Do you talk about what was going on? Things that only Clint would have seen? Is he allowed to even say that? Does it discredit him if he does give you information?
No, he doesn't give away, he doesn't talk about anything really personal or gossipy about the people he protected. He gives you an insight into what their personalities were like, the things that he witnessed, and he's just very sort of objective. But this book, 5 Presidents, it's like you're walking in his shoes through history. So we tried to make it like you feel like you're there, you're him, and all these things are happening at the time. And he started when he was 26 years old, and here he was traveling around the world to 11 different countries with President Eisenhower.
Growing up, and obviously not giving your age away, you're
I'm 52.
Lady. Okay, well, I didn't want to do that.
We're about the same age, and
Okay,
you
so-
are pretty.
Yeah.
Let's just say it.
You and Steve are about 10 years removed from people that, like my mother, who was in high school the day that JFK was assassinated. You know, I'm younger. I'm 40 years old. I'll be 41 next month. But growing up, because I think I told you this on the phone, Mr. Hill, my uncles served JFK as well. They're both United States Marshals. They actually looked after the kids. So some of these black and white videos, I would see my Uncle Bud and Uncle Bill Gerland in the back, which to me, I'm like, wow. You know, so growing up, my family was JFK this, JFK that, JFK this. But my mom, I'll never forget her telling me the story. I guess she's in her mid-60s now. She was in high school the day JFK was assassinated. The entire school was in tears, crying. You know, the president's been assassinated, the president. And all I took away from that over these years was the respect for the presidency.
The office itself.
The office itself. I mean, right or left, doesn't matter. The point is how the public views the president and the office.
And we've got to get back to that.
One of the probably last times, maybe in American history, that the entire country viewed the presidency as an honorable, 100% honorable position for the most part, even hearing the rumors of Marilyn Monroe?
Well, you know, finally when Gerald Ford took the oath of office, initially everybody felt a great sense of relief and the respect started to come back, and then he pardoned Nixon and it all went away. So probably true that it goes way back to the Kennedy days when there was really respect for the office.
Yeah. And I think you see that in this book. That was something as we were writing this book, and I learned so much just writing it.
I bet.
And living through this history is it starts with Eisenhower, and he was so respected around the world, revered. You know, he was a general, and everybody loved him. And so you go from that to then the assassination of President Kennedy, and then Johnson and the Vietnam War, and then the resignation of Nixon, and you just see this decline in the respect for America, not only in our own country, but around the world.
I think trust was lost along the way.
Yeah, absolutely it was.
Trust was lost.
Yeah, I think trust died that day.
Give me a second. We'll come back talking with Mr. Clint Hill and Lisa McCubbin, 7 p.m. this evening at the Jimmy Carter Library. There's a book signing. There's a book reading for 5 presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford, which, by the way, for the first time, I think, for the first time ever, I tried to dig the audio version last night.
You did. Because you and I both have attention issues, and to read a book is tough. But to hear it,
I think I figured it out. Rachel's my wife was helping me out with it. Very simple. You just hit the button and the thing comes down. I listen to it in my ears. It's pretty cool. And then I hear this guy talking to me. It's pretty neat.
But I want to look really cool and have your book in my hand, so I'm going to the beach next week and I'm reading you. I'm going to be all about you.
The photos in the book are really fantastic.
Oh, it's got pictures.
Too.
Thank God.
Yes.
There's photos. Y'all got to do more of that.
Photos.
All right, give us a minute. We're going to come back more of this conversation in just a minute. You're listening to Bailey and Southside Rock 100.5. Mr. Clint Hill, former United States Secret Service agent and author, as well as Lisa McCubbin in studio with us because of the book, 5 Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford, which, by the way, Amazon.com is where you can buy it, but also tonight at 7 p.m. at the Carter Presidential Library, there's going to be a reading, a talk, a book signing. It's actually going to take place in the Carter Center's Cecil B. Day Chapel, so that's exactly where you can find both of them. Extraordinary conversation. I mean, we've had Mr. Hill on yesterday for a good portion of the show. Today, we're honored to have both Mr. Hill and Lisa in studio with us to talk about this. I've heard that there's a fantastic story. We spent so much time talking about JFK. There's such a fantastic story regarding Johnson that you have. This is also in the book, too, right, Clint?
Oh, yes, it's in the book, yeah. Yeah, we were on an around-the-world trip, and it was in 1967. And we got toward the end of the trip. We were in Rome. We were coming back to the United States. We had to refuel in the Azores with Air Force One. And so we took off from Rome. It was at night. Got to the Azores. It's early in the morning, Christmas Eve. So we landed to refuel. And the pilot had radioed ahead and arranged for the PX to remain open so people on the plane could at least buy something as a gift for friends, because we hadn't done any Christmas shopping. So when we landed, I told everybody, go ahead, I'll stay here with the president, because he had gone to bed on the plane, and he put on his pajamas as usual, and he's sound asleep.
Were they presidential pajamas?
I don't recall, but probably had the...
Was the seal there?
Probably had the presidential seal all over him.
Yeah.
So everybody left, and I was down at the foot of the ramp walking back and forth, and all of a sudden I hear this, "Hey, Clint, where's everybody?" I said, "Mr. President, everyone's gone to the PX. It's Christmas Eve. They've gone to buy some Christmas gifts." He says, "Hell, I haven't bought anything either." He says, "Let's go." So he's in his pajamas.
Wow.
He reaches in a coat closet and he puts on a trench coat over his pajamas. Down the ramp he comes. And I grabbed an Air Force car and driver, put him in the back seat, and away we went to the PX. Got in there, and the employees, I mean, they were just, they couldn't believe the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces walking around in his pajamas
shopping,
buying Christmas gifts.
Which actually makes me want to ask this question, Mr. Hill, is that there's 5 presidents that you've served. That's Johnson, of course. But what about Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, and Ford? What did they wear to bed?
I never went to examine that, but
I see Nixon as a tidy-whitey guy, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I would think that, if they're all wearing pajamas, I'm not asking, it's for, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I'm curious, were they all pajama type of people? Were they shorts guys? Were they underdrawers? I mean, don't you stay in the room? Didn't you stay in the room with them?
No, I didn't stay in the room with them. When they get to their residential area, that's private. So whatever they wore to bed, I could have cared less.
Let's talk about Jacqueline Kennedy. What did she wear to bed?
I'm not going to tell you that.
Okay, because I know that you saw.
But you know that.
I've got one question here, too. Just for, you say that, and again, we're keying on all these presidents. For those listening, it was Eisenhower to Ford that you served. With JFK, just going back to one more question there, you saw things. You were on his yacht. You witnessed his personal life, and you witnessed Jackie's personal life. Was there issue? Did either one ever really confide in you about things?
Well, about some things, but whatever they did confide to me, you'll never know.
Oh, so that's never going to come out in a book.
It'll never come out.
Would they try to play you? Like, would Jackie say?
Yeah.
Would Jackie come up to you and say, "Hey, Clint, I'm hearing things about John. Can you confirm?"
Which is Marilyn Monroe crap.
Would that happen?
No, that would not happen.
No. But
I'll say this: she was a very perceptive individual, and she was fully aware of anything. If there was anything going on, she wouldn't have known it.
And
she would not have.
She would have.
Oh, she would have. That's what I've heard. Yeah.
And going back, there's been several things on that fateful day, November 22nd in Dallas. At that time, you were assigned to the side of Kennedy's car because you're also there for Jackie, but you're assigned left side car, right,
left rear
on the vehicle. We've heard different things. We see you in the Zapruder film jump up on the back of the vehicle and then ride off on the vehicle, and it looks like you actually get into the back seat, at least one leg in, as you're holding on. All the conspiracies that are out there, not different shooters or anything, but I've actually even heard that a Secret Service agent in a car behind was carrying an M16, and that weapon might have accidentally gone off. Can you tell us what happened that day?
Well, insofar as that agent is concerned, he was holding an AR-16. That was the weapon, the big weapon we used in the follow-up car at that time. But that weapon was never fired, and it was checked to make sure that was the case. And there were 2 individuals in the follow-up car with him at that time, they being President Kennedy's closest associates, Dave Powers and Kenny O'Donnell. And if anything in that car would have happened that would have damaged the president, they sure as hell would have said something. But nothing like that did happen. What happened was we were coming down Elm Street in Dallas after going through the entire main part of the city where there were large crowds. Everybody was very enthusiastic and friendly. There hadn't been any problems. And we just came down past a large, or about a 7-story building. It's called the Texas School Book Depository. It was on our right at the corner of Elm and Houston. And I was on the left-hand side of the follow-up car, which is about 3 feet of separation between the president's car and the follow-up car at that time. And all of a sudden, I heard a explosive noise over my right shoulder. And I had been scanning to the left, and so when I heard that, I started to turn to the right. And as I did, I saw the president grab at his throat and move to his left. I knew then that it had been a gunshot wound because of his reaction. And so I jumped to run toward the presidential car to get up on top of the back of it to form a shield there, a barrier, so no more damage could be done. When I jumped off, I had to go between a motorcycle officer and the car, and so there was a lot of noise. They told me later at that time there was a second shot that was fired. I didn't hear that one. But as I approached the president's car, a third shot was fired, and that one hit the president in the head, in the lower rear of the head, but it exploded out of his skull on the upper right rear portion above the ear. And it was so destructive, and it was like an eruption of materials out of the wound. Blood and brain matter and bone fragments. And that all came over me and the car and Mrs. Kennedy. And she at that time then, as I got up on the car, she came up on the trunk. But she didn't know I was there. She was trying to grab some of the material that came out of the president's head. And she did retrieve some of it. And then I put her in the back seat. As soon as I put her in the back seat, the president's body, it fell to his left, into her lap, with his head in her lap, and the right side of his head was up. I could see his eyes were fixed, the hole in the skull. Most of the brain matter was gone from that area, so I assumed it was a fatal wound. I turned and gave a thumbs down to the follow-up car and screamed for the driver to get us to a hospital, and he took up. We went very rapidly, as fast as possible, to what turned out to be Parkland Hospital. I wedged myself up on top of the back of the car so that I wouldn't fall off, but I was in a protective position so nobody could have done any further damage to anybody in the car.
They say, well, from what I understand, because of that day, the way the Secret Service handles motorcades and presidents, the way they walk by the car has all been changed. Is there anything that you personally, Mr. Hill, would have done differently that day? You personally?
No, there's nothing I could have done differently that day. I actually went back to Dallas in 1990 to examine the situation. I walked the Dealey Plaza area, went up in the Texas School Book Depository, went to the 6th floor window, examined everything, the angle, the weather, the type of transportation we were using. And I came away with knowing that there was nothing more I could have done.
So you don't buy in any conspiracy theory outside that there was a lone shooter?
As far as I'm concerned, there was a lone shooter. It was Lee Harvey Oswald. He only fired 3 shots, and those were the only 3 shots fired that day.
Well, you heard the first shot. You didn't hear the second shot.
Correct.
But you the third shot. And people, I've never had a bullet shot by me. You've been, in battle, and of course you were there that day. Did you hear the bullet? Was it coming, as far as you could tell, in the sound from the same direction? So we put to rest maybe the grassy knoll or anything else?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can put the grassy knoll completely to rest. Just nobody was over there shooting.
We'll take a quick one. We'll come back. We'll push headlines to the end of the show. It's fine. You staying?
Are y'all okay?
Sure, we're good.
Excellent. Perfect. I know I'm going to try to get some phone calls here. I do want to ask, and maybe the answer is just a no, and that'd be that simple, but outside of JFK and the assassination there with Eisenhower, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. Again, remember, it's a different day and age. No social media. News didn't spread as fast, but as a Secret Service agent that was protecting these presidents, was there ever an attempt on any of these presidents' lives that never made the media, that you were there, that you were able to stop before anything happened?
I don't recall any that, I was actually physically present. But yes, there were attempts and indications of someone desiring to do something, and they were thwarted by the Secret Service through receiving sufficient information in advance, so that they could intercept it. And
why do I feel like there's more to that story? Like, I feel like that there's things, and if you can't talk about it, you can't talk about it. But why do I think that there were attempts on these presidents' lives that were thwarted in more of a serious way, but it was just kept inside? The media was never.
Well, it's not in anybody's best interest, we don't think, to reveal all this stuff, because it just gives somebody else some kind of an idea to do something in a certain manner.
And all presidents, maybe this occurred?
Pretty much so. In all presidents, there's been something that.
So Nixon, even Nixon, and Lyndon.
He was not everybody's favorite.
No, definitely not.
That might be bigger than the Axel Scott Snap stuff right there.
I went around doing that peace sign thing. I bet you don't. You hate the double peace sign now.
Give me a second. We'll get back on time. More with Mr. Clint Hill. Again, remember, 7 p.m. tonight, Jimmy Carter Library, book signing with both Mr. Hill and Lisa McCubbin, the authors of 5 Presidents. My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. If you're not buying this, especially with Father's Day coming up, Mother's Day,
The perfect gift.
Well, Mother's Day just passed, but Father's Day coming up, bam. This is the perfect gift. Amazon.com, and of course, you'll be able to pick it up tonight as well. It's Bailey and Southside Rock 100.5. Clint Hill, former United States Secret Service agent and author in studio with us, and also the co-author of the book, 5 Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. Lisa McCubbin, which tonight, 7 p.m. at the Carter Presidential Library. They'll be there signing the book. They'll have a reading, chit-chat, a Q&A, I'm guessing, type of thing going on, which is going to be fantastic. Let me ask you this. As all the 5 presidents that you've been with, is there something that you still have, a favorite item that you've kept from any of those presidents that you treasure? I'm getting a smile and a laugh and a head nod.
Well, yes, a number of different things, but one thing is rather different than anything else. During the Johnson administration in 1968, I received one day in the command post at the ranch a package. It was from President Johnson. So I opened it up, and it was a set of what we called ranch clothes, pants and shirt, identical to the ranch clothes that he always wore on the ranch.
Like Wranglers or something?
Well, no, they were made special by special tailor out of special material. They were kind of sand color, very, very good quality. And so fine. But then I got a call from the president. He was out in the pool area, and he said, Clint, you get my package? I said, yes. And he said, I want you to put those clothes on, come out here by the pool, because I want to see how they fit.
Oh, wow.
So I had to put them on in the command post, and there were other agents in there, and I was inundated with comments about my now becoming a Texan, a rancher, a member of the Lyndon B. Johnson family, a few other snide remarks. And then I went out to the pool area, and he looked at me and approved what I was wearing, and that was the last time I ever wore them.
You still have them, though?
I still have them, but I've never worn them since.
Yeah, I wouldn't wear that either. I figured you took his slippers or something like that. When you're around Lyndon, and again with Johnson, I look at their personalities, and I see Lyndon had to have been the one guy that was the closest, I would say, to John Wayne type of dude. Am I right? Am I just going there because he's a Texan? But I just figured he used rough language. He wasn't afraid to cuss, kept a cigar in his hand, just kind of like a man's man, not as presidential as maybe the other 4 you protected.
Well, when he was at the ranch, he was really in his own element, because he was born there and grew up in that area. And that's where he loved to be. And yes, he was a bigger-than-life individual. He didn't carry a cigar in his hand, but he would use profanity occasionally and do things that might be considered a little crude, like stopping and going to the bathroom in the weeds. But
there you go. That's what I thought.
Other than that, it was
when female reporters were in the car.
Yeah, that didn't seem to bother him too much.
And no pictures were ever taken, huh?
No, there were no photographers around, because twice a day, we would tour the ranch property in Texas. He would drive his car, and he would have guests, and we would be in a car accompanying him. But it was a routine every day, at least twice. And there was just not the LBJ ranch. There were a bunch of ranches that he owned and had access to.
Let me get some phone calls here. I got people. Quick questions. Let's run through this as fast as we can. Graham in Atlanta, question for either Mr. Clint Hill or Lisa McCubbin.
Excellent. Yeah, great show. Thank you. I'll have to catch the podcast from yesterday. Special Agent Hill, you mentioned just real briefly President Kennedy being concerned about wine glasses in the background of a picture. If you could speak to maybe his media savvy, or just how you saw the presidential role kind of change with your time there, of them being savvy and kind of a media socialite, and with today's social media. I mean, back then, that was amazing for him to think that pictures here in Greece might show up in America tomorrow, the next day.
It's actually funny, Graham, because that was a question that we asked him yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. The exact same question. I don't know if you want to answer it again. That's fine, because it's a good question.
He was very image conscious.
Yeah.
So he just didn't want that to appear. He knew that would not play well in the United States with the voters, to see all that kind of extravagance. And so we just kept that out of the picture.
Because Kennedy came from more money than any other president you protected, obviously.
Well, he came from a lot of money, his family, but I'm not so sure, Johnson or Nixon. Ford didn't have any money. Eisenhower, he lived on a general's retirement, so no.
Okay. Travis in Covington, quick question, please.
Agent Hill, great honor to speak to you. One question is, my understanding, the presidential limousine for John Kennedy, just hours after the assassination, was taken away and cleaned and refurbished and remodeled. I just wondered if you had any insights on why that would not have been treated more as a piece of evidence than it was.
And we hit that yesterday, too.
We did. Go ahead and answer that again.
That's great.
You guys got to listen every day. Come on.
Keep listening.
It was treated as a piece of evidence, and that's why immediately when we got to Parkland Hospital and we moved the president from the car, the people who were responsible for the car put the top back on. Now, they had to clean a attachment portion of the front end of the roof. It was a aluminum bar that ran up and over the front seat. That's where they attached the roof to. But they didn't do any more cleansing of the car than that. They then drove it to Love Field, put it on an Air Force cargo plane, flew it back to Washington. It was taken to the White House Secret Service garage. The FBI went in there with a team, and the Secret Service had a team, and they examined it inch by inch, and they discovered a few things. They discovered 2 or 3 fragments and bullets, things of that nature. They noticed a nick on the inside of the upper front window frame. And then after that was all completed, it wasn't just a matter of hours, it was days, maybe weeks before this happened, but then the car was returned to Ford Motor Company because that's actually who owned it. We leased it from them, and they in turn had Hess and Eisenhart, who had fabricated the car, completely redo it. It was now enclosed, and it was made bullet resistant, and the car was it was painted, instead of midnight blue, painted black, and then it was brought back and put in service.
Steve, quickly, and we're going to wrap things up here for Mr. Hill or Lisa McCubbin.
Okay, Mr. Hill, my question is, the first helicopter detachment, Army 1, my father-in-law was on that crew, Sergeant James Lambright. Did you know him?
I'm trying to remember because there were so many different crews we had.
It was the very first one.
I may have, but I don't recall the name.
What do you think the name's in the book there, Stephen?
I was just asking to see if he could touch on it.
Well, those guys were really fantastic. Each and every one of them. Those helicopter crews, they were a very valuable asset to the Office of the President and to the Secret Service because they provided us with transportation that was really secure.
Well, look, obviously we could do this all day.
We sure could, and there's so many more questions to be asked, but what an honor to be in your presence.
Thank you so much, both Mr. Hill, Clint Hill, and Lisa McCubbin.
Yeah,
for
great job,
coming
Lisa.
in.
Thank you. And come on out tonight and we'll answer questions, any questions you have.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. 7 o'clock, 7 tonight, and meet and greet and all that good stuff.
We'll be there.
With a quickie, because I can't not ask it, what the chaos in the vehicle once you jumped in the car and you're driving to the hospital because other people had been hit with a bullet. What was the chaos? What were people doing in the vehicle as you drove? What we don't see in the Sabruder film.
They actually weren't doing anything. Mrs. Connolly had pulled the governor over into her lap, and she was covering him up, and the president was lying in Mrs. Kennedy's lap, and the driver was trying his best to get us to the hospital, and the agent in the right front seat was on the radio, but he didn't have to say much because there was nothing he could do or say.
Okay.
All right, tonight, 7 o'clock, Jimmy Carter Library. Go out there and also grab the book there, 5 Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. So tonight or Amazon.com.